Everyone, and welcome to session 6, getting started with G Suite for Education. My name is Tim Brady. I'm the subject advisor here at Pearson EdExcel for computer science and IT subjects. And I'd like to welcome you to Digital Live, enabling education online, delivered by Pearson. While schools and colleges are closed, Pearson have been supporting teachers and tutors in making this change to everyday teaching online and help them find their new normal. Across the day, we've been joined by educators and industry experts who've been demonstrating their expertise and offering support that will help educators from both schools and colleges to get the best out of their learners. Before I introduce our next session, some housekeeping points. All participants will have the opportunity to send in questions via the chat box. There will be an opportunity to answer some during the session, and there will be a Q&A session near the end of the presentation. If we're not able to discuss or respond to everything you ask, we will follow up after the event. I'm now delighted to introduce Dean Stokes and Kirri Gooch from Google for Education.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Tim. Hi, everyone. My name's Kirri. I am the National Accounts Manager in the Google for Education team. And shortly you are going to be introduced to the rest of the speakers that we have today. And I'll introduce them when it's their turn to speak, but you can probably see them at the bottom of the screen. So today we're here to talk about getting started with G Suite for Education. So this is really this session is going to be focused on how you can get started, how you can get set up, and different top tips for you to get using the tools, including a hands-on demo, which we'll go into more detail on in a moment. So as I said, I'm really lucky to be joined by some great speakers today. So I have my colleague Dean Stokes, who is the Education Adoption Manager for EMEA. And we have Peter and Laura, who are from Barton Peveril Sixth Form College, and will be sharing their experiences of using G Suite, particularly around distance learning. So I'm going to get started by talking about some of the resources available for Sorry, I'm going to get started by talking about some of the resources available for Google for Education. So for those of you that are brand new to Google for Education and G Suite in particular, you may not be aware, but G Suite essentially is a free productivity suite available for free for schools and colleges across the whole world. And the reason that they are so popular and that we get great uptake and people using them is because some of these key reasons, and I'm sure that later on when Barton Peveril College come on and talk about their use of G Suite, they'll talk to some of these too, and hopefully you'll see this throughout the demo. But the ease of use and the this is the feedback we always get from teachers, right? That the tools are really easy to use, they're really intuitive, and teachers can kind of just pick up and get on with it. The fact that they're flexible and scalable, so we have primary schools with 100 students, right up to secondary schools and colleges with thousands and thousands of students using these tools every day. So the fact that they're flexible and scalable depending on your particular need makes them really popular. They're built for collaboration, which means that you can work in real time, live, because we're working in the cloud, and they are secure by design. And actually, fundamentally, everything that we do at Google is built around security, and we can talk more about that. And if you have any questions, please do let us know in the chat. I will call out here as well, for those of you that are new to using G Suite, it is GDPR compliant, and I know that's a question that we often get in the Q&A, so before that one gets asked, I wanted to make sure that I covered that off. So, in terms of getting started with G Suite, sometimes people come to us and say, it's great, we've got the tools, but we just don't really know what we're doing with them, and what resources do you have available? So I just wanted to introduce something new. So some of you that are brand new to G Suite, or it is your first time kind of seeing Google Classroom or Google Meet, for example, we've created this temporary hub of information called Teach from Home. And essentially it links out to really valuable resources for teachers right now in the current climate. So things on there about how to specifically, get a Google Meet up and running and get your students into it and kind of delivering online content, as well as tutorials for using things like Google Classroom and Gmail. And also we've just introduced some more content on there around for guardians and parents, because we appreciate that a lot of parents right now, and you may be one of them, are supporting children at home and using these tools. So we've made sure that we filled out this resource centre specifically for the current climate and the need right now. What you will notice, though, when you go on to Teach from Home is that it links out to a ton of resources that we already have available. So in the kind of the first one on this particular slide points out a blog post that we update, and we release regular updates on the blog. And specifically recently, we've been making sure that these are really useful pieces of writing that talk to tips and tricks of how to use the tools for distance learning, but also any feature updates that we have coming out. In addition to that, we have something called the Teacher Centre, and this is our kind of one-stop shop for all training that you might need in kind of getting set up and running with G Suite. So specifically right now, we've launched a new set of training on there. So if you've been on the Teacher Centre before, you may have done your Educator Level 1 or Level 2. You may have noticed, or if you've been on recently, you may have noticed that we've introduced a new distance learning specific resource. And this is training to actually support you in getting started with G Suite for distance learning, because I'm sure, as you know, some people may have dived into using Google Classroom before, but are maybe not using it in the way that they need to now. So that's a really great resource to go and check out. And we're also running a UK webinar series, and this is specifically showcasing UK schools and colleges in how they're using G Suite, a very similar format to what we've got today, but more focused on different products and different ways you might use the tools. So you can go and check that out and get signed up, and they're free to attend. We've actually had 4 this week, and we'll have 2 over the next few weeks every week. So definitely something to check out if you want to learn a little bit more or take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the stuff we're going to have a look at today. And I'm just going to kind of go back to the Teacher Centre because, as I said, it's full of really great resources. You can even do your certifications on there. But we've actually kind of revamped it, and we've made it a lot more easy to use, and basically included these product guides, which are things that our teachers are really asking for. So, you know, if I was kind of just getting started with Jamboard, what would I need to do? What types of things can it do? So these product guides are really useful. So go and check them out if you haven't already. And so for those of you that are brand new to G Suite, you may be thinking, that's great. You know, I have a personal Gmail account. I don't really want my students having access to that. What do I need to do to get this up and running for my organisation? So G Suite for Education is covered under its own terms and conditions, and essentially it means that, you know, it's been created for education purposes, and as I said at the beginning, is used by educators across the whole world. So what we've done to make this really easy for IT admins is set up this quick start guide, and you can find it at this link here, and this will talk you through how you can go about getting set up with G Suite for Education specifically, and how you might manage that for your particular context. So as I've talked about already, for those of you that are brand new to G Suite, G Suite is just one element of the products that we have. G Suite for Education, as I said, is the free platform. Google Classroom kind of is an umbrella. G Suite is the umbrella to Google Classroom, and Google Classroom really is that product that brings everything together, right? You can set work, you can bring in your Google Docs, you can bring in your forms, and it really brings that kind of learning alive by that communication between teachers and students. And we also have devices, which are Chromebooks. Some of you may be familiar with. We're not going to go into too much detail about Chromebooks today, although everyone on the call would be able to answer any questions. So please make sure that you pop in any questions, and we'll get to those at the end. So how might we get started? Well, basically, the first step is to create an account. And the way to find this is essentially to go and type into Google, sign up for a G Suite for Education account, and it will take you through to this form. You fill in some steps. You need to make sure that you have a domain which you own, or at least have access to the person that's bought that domain for you. because you need to verify your domain, and that's a really important step before we can actually approve any of the applications that have come in. So in order to kind of get set up really quickly, those are the first things that you need to do. And if you're doing that yourself, then the easiest thing to do is to head back over to that quick guide, and you can find some quick tips on how to get the account and the domain up and running, and so it's appropriate and all the right settings are in place for your students. However, if you are in England, you can, with the support of the Department for Education, there's actually a funded program right now where we've worked with Microsoft and the Department for Education on this. There's a funded program to allow schools to use trusted partners that we've all pre-authorized to get up and running with G Suite, and it's at no cost to schools. So if you are brand new to G Suite for Education, you're not quite sure how to get started and you want really just that kind of little bit of help, then there is a program available for you. And to register for that program and to find out more information, you can head over to the link covid19.thekeysupport.com. Sorry, that's not particularly clear, but I'm sure we'll be able to come back to that. However, it's there, it's ready to go. The program is live and running, so I would definitely urge you to go and make use of that. So with that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Dean, who's going to talk about the live demo and talk about G Suite in a little bit more detail. Over to you, Dean.
Great, thanks, Kirri. My name's Dean. I'm the Education Adoption Manager for Europe, Middle East and Africa on the Google for Education team, which means I help make sure that schools that are using our tools are able to make the most out of them. So I look after all of our training and certification programs and work directly with some of our customers as well. I do see one question already came through about accessing G Suite in the Isle of Man. You said you have an account where you can see Classroom. So as Kirri mentioned, Classroom is just one of the apps that are that is part of G Suite. So when you log into your account, you have access to Google Drive and through there, Google Docs and Sheets and so on. Now, normally at this point, I would be doing a live demo, but unfortunately, we weren't able to facilitate a live demo and all be on camera here today to talk to you. So earlier on today, I recorded a quick 15-minute demo to show you how easy it is to get started with Google Classroom, and also a quick bonus of looking at a self-marking quiz in Google Forms as well. So whilst it isn't live, please do feel free to throw questions into the Q&A, which is just down there on the screen that you're looking at, and I'll have a look at them as they come through, and we'll answer any at the end. So with that, let's play the video, please. So the first thing I'm going to do as a teacher is go up to the Apps Launcher button on the top right of the screen here on the Google homepage and choose Google Classroom. Now, Google Classroom is what we would say mission control for teachers and students. It's where I can post all of my work, I can receive work from students, and I can grade and assess it if I want to as well. So to create a new class, I just click this plus button on the top right of the screen and click Create Class. And then I just need to give the class a name. So I'm going to call this one Pearson space, like so, and click Create. Now, I think this is the quickest and easiest way to create classrooms. It gives you complete control over how many classes you want, whether you want to do a class per class that you teach, and you can even make classrooms for smaller groups of students as well. You can use some third-party tools to sync your classes from a system like Sims or Progresso or whatever it might be that you use. And when you do that, the students are automatically added and moved around as well. So here's what Classroom looks like if you haven't seen it. This is called the stream. It's the first page that you see. And this is really just a space designed for a bit of discussion. And it's also like a news feed. So as I post assignments and so on, there'll be notifications posted into the stream here. So students could come in here and post things. They can comment on each other's posts. You can post things as well. But if you don't like the sound of that, you can actually change the settings here. So I could say that only students can comment on what I post, or actually only I can post or comment on anything that's in here. So this can be really handy if I want to just leave a quick reminder, for example. Now, there's a few other tabs at the top of the screen here, and we're going to work through those in a moment. But before we do, I need to add some students. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this. I'm going to copy this code here. And so you could have emailed this out to your students or put it on your school or class website, for example. Another way I could do that is to go to the people page, and I could directly add a student by clicking this add button just here and then typing in their email address. Now, I probably don't want to do that for a group of 30 students unless I have a single email that invites them all individually. So I'm going to switch over to a student view now and add that student to the class. So here's what it looks like if I'm a student. I'm not a member of any classes yet. All I need to do is click this plus button and choose Join Class. Now you can see here that I also have the option to create a class, but your admin can disable that so that only teachers are able to create classes if that's something that would be more comfortable for you or your school. So I choose Join Class, I put in the code like this and click Join, and then that's going to add the student to the class, and they will have access now to everything that I post in that class as well. There we go. So it looks really similar, and you see they don't have the option to post in the stream because I disabled that a moment ago as the teacher. So let's jump back to the teacher view. Here I am on that people page. I can see that my first student is in here now. And one nice feature is that we can invite guardians for each student as well. Now, if I do that, it means that I get to add a guardian email address, and they get a daily or weekly update of the work that has been set for their child. It's up to them how often they receive it. They don't get access to the work that's been done. They just see the instructions that you've posted along with an assignment. So I find that's a really good way to start a conversation with a student about the work they've been doing, maybe if they're not being forthcoming with their parents when they're at home. The other tab that we see at the top here is a grades tab. Right now it's completely empty because I've not set or graded any work, but effectively this turns into an online grade book where I can easily see at a glance all of the different scores for all of the different pieces of work. Now the main page that we're going to use in Google Classroom is called Classwork. So it's on this screen where I'm going to post all of my assignments, maybe materials that I want students to have. I might have a quick question, for example. And the way I do that is super simple. I just need to remember this one button that says Create, and that gives me all of the different options that I need. I'm going to choose Assignment for this one. And here's what it looks like when I need to set an assignment. So I'm going to give the assignment a title. We're going to call it Mission to Mars. And if I wanted to, I could leave some instructions, but I'm going to leave this blank for the sake of this demo. And I could create a document right here, but I've actually already prepared something. And so I'm going to choose this Add option here. And when I do that, I get the option to choose something from my Google Drive. I can link to somewhere on the web. I can add any other type of file from my computer, or I can link directly to a YouTube video. Now I have a document already ready to go in Google Drive. It's called Mission to Mars. It's a really super simple worksheet. So I'm going to add that here. And when I add a Google document like this, or a Google Sheets file, or Google Slides, for example, I get this extra option over on the right-hand side. Now, by default, it says students can view the file. So that's really helpful if this is just a page where I want them to read and learn or take notes, perhaps. I've also got the option for students to edit the file. That actually means that we would all be able to collaborate on the same file, which is one of the great things about Google Docs. You can have up to 100 people working at once in a single document. Or I can say, I want to make a copy for each student of this document that I've set here. So I'm going to choose Make a Copy for each student, and that's going to take all the hard work off of my hands and just do it all automatically in the background for me. Now, before I click Assign, I've got a few other options over on the right-hand side here. I can set a piece of work for multiple classes at once. This could be really helpful if you have a responsibility across a whole subject or year group. Perhaps maybe you're the numeracy lead and you want to set a piece of maths work across the whole school even. And I can set individually for different students as well. So if I wanted to differentiate the work, maybe I have slightly different versions of this assignment. I can choose the individual students that this would go to. My class is very small at the moment, though. It only has one student. So I'm going to leave this as it is for now. I can also assign a points value, or I can say this is ungraded. I'm going to leave this as it is for now. And the main thing to remember about all of these options is that we've designed Classroom to be really flexible, so that you don't actually have to do your assessment through here. You might just decide that this is an easy way to get documents and materials out to students. So things like the due date you can set, but you don't have to. And topics as well are just a way to organize your classwork page. So I'm going to create a topic called writing and put this assignment in that topic. Now, we also recently introduced rubrics. Rubrics is quite an American term, I find, but it's essentially a mark scheme. So I could create a really simple mark scheme, perhaps where I mark spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And I might maybe have something like pass, and then merit, and maybe distinction. like this, and I can give them a different points value too. And maybe if I wanted to, I could copy those and do the same thing for punctuation and grammar as well. And when I come to grade this work, if I want to grade it in Classroom, I can just select the area that the student has reached to save me having to kind of manually decide the number of points and then add it up as I go. So I'm going to save that rubric. That's attached to the assignment, and the students will see it as well. And then finally, we have originality reports. We're not going to go into detail on this today, but essentially, if you turn this on, it allows you and the student to scan their work and perhaps check for if they've forgotten to reference anything that maybe they've quoted from a book or from the internet. And we check the work against Google's search database to highlight any passages that perhaps they've forgotten to do that. Now, when I assign, I can schedule this as well. So if you're super organized, you could schedule all of your assignments for the upcoming week or term, even if you wanted to. You could save this as a draft and then just manually assign it at a later date, or just assign it right now, which is what I'm going to do. So I've assigned this piece of classwork. I'm going to switch back now to the student view so you can see what it looks like from their side. So back over in the classroom here as a student, if I go to the classwork page, what we're going to see is this assignment appear on this page, and I'll be able to go in and access that sheet that the teacher set for me. So remember, I created that writing topic, so I can see it organized under this topic now. And Mission to Mars is the assignment that I've been given. And rather than go straight through to the document, I'm just going to click View Assignment here to give us this one-page overview of everything that I need. So on the right-hand side, you can see the document that has been set for me. I do have the option to add other files as well if there's other things I need to hand in. And I can see the rubric or mark scheme that was created as well. So I know how I'm going to be graded for this piece of work. So as the student then, let's go ahead and open up this document here. It's a really simple document. So let's just fill this out. Add my name here and an answer here. It's as simple as that. Now, I could hand in this piece of work. You see I have this turn in button at the top of the screen here, but I don't have to. Even if I don't hand it in, because the teacher made a copy of this automatically for every student, they already have access to see the work as it's being done. So if I just switch back now to the teacher view, as the teacher, if I go through into this assignment now, it will show me all of the different students that I have. Again, I've only got one in this class. And I can see their document already. So I can click to open up this document like so. And as the student's working on it, I would see what they're doing because of the way that real-time collaboration works in Google Docs. And the way that I would grade this usually is to highlight some of the text in the document here and click to leave a comment on the right-hand side. So I might say something like, how would you take enough? Perhaps like this, and comment. Now, often when you're grading, you're going to be using the same kind of comments over and over. And so we actually have a comment bank built in here where I've got a few different comments like this. And so if I was to highlight and leave another comment, you'll see as I start typing different pieces of feedback, it comes up with the suggestions from my comment bank that I can easily just add in like so. And then on the right-hand side, I can put in my grade if I want to give it a grade. I can grade using the rubric as well, by choosing the different sections. And if I had multiple students, I can really quickly go from one student to another using this list at the top or using the arrows up here too. And this is also the same screen. If I'd enabled originality reports, I'd be able to run that report and see whether the student had copied anything from the internet and forgotten to leave a reference. And as the teacher here, you see that I've got this return option. Now, if I was to click that, it means that this grade would be released to the student and they would see it. And you see, I can do that even if the student hasn't turned it in. And so we really try to keep that flexibility in mind. You don't necessarily want to have to chase every student. If you've already got access to their work, it doesn't really matter at this point if they clicked hand in or not. So that's what setting an assignment and a brief bit of grading looks like in Google Classroom. And again, you might decide just to carry on grading in a different system that you're using or in your paper mark book and just use Classroom as a way to distribute the work. Either way, it's absolutely fine. And my advice generally is just find the best thing that works for you, that is easy to use for everyone involved. So I'm going to jump back into Classroom really quickly here. And in the current situation, there's obviously lots of remote work happening. And we've seen schools approach this in many different ways. Some schools sending home paper packets of work for students to complete, perhaps uploading pictures of some of that work. You could do that with Google Classroom. Some using something like Google Classroom to set and assess and update students and stay connected with them through comments on that work as well. And some choosing to do live video calls as well, whether that's for a quick introduction to a lesson or a concept, or for a whole lesson even. So what we've done is integrated Google Meet, which is our video conferencing solution. It's part of G Suite, included for free in G Suite for Education. And we've created an integration with Google Classroom. So you can see at the top of the page here, I have the option to generate a Meet link, and it's one click. It generates a link for me. And then I could say to the students, okay, let's jump into this video call at 10 a.m. today, for example. And you see, I decide whether that link is visible to students or not. And what's great about this link is that if I'm the first one in as the teacher and make sure I'm the first one out, I can remove the other students if I need to, then the students won't be able to join this video call when I'm not there. Now, that is also dependent on your administrator making sure that they've disabled the ability to create meetings for students, which is best practice that we're seeing in schools where only teachers are able to go and create meetings, but students are able to join them. And so I'm going to actually hide that from students for now and click Save. And then I might post something here in the stream that says, let's meet at 10 a.m. I could then make this link visible. We all join the meeting. I do my introduction. We leave the meeting, and then they go and work independently. And to show you what this looks like when you join a meeting, students don't have to download anything. They literally just click the link. If it's the first time they've used Google Meet, they would need to press allow or block for their microphone or webcam. And then they literally just click to join the meeting like so. And it is as simple as that. I've not had to download any extra apps or extensions or anything. I can just join through my browser. So if I already have access to Classroom, whether it's through my phone or a laptop, I'll definitely be able to access Google Meet. So that's a super quick overview of Classroom, and I hope that's given you an idea of how it can be used to set and assess work and organize work in the classwork screen as well through topics and so on. What I'd really like to show you is how you can also create self-marking quizzes in Google Drive. So we have an app called Google Forms. It's a type of file that you can create really quickly and easily in Google Drive. It's really great if ever you need to do a quick survey. But a couple of years ago, we also introduced the ability to create self-marking quizzes. So if you've used Google Forms before, but you've never created a quiz, you can actually click this settings icon here, go to the quizzes tab, and you just toggle this option to make this a quiz. Now, there's a few different options we're not going to dive into just here, but you can decide whether students get to see the scores and their answers and the correct answers right away, or whether you manually release them at a later date. The other thing that I've got ticked here is locked mode for Chromebooks. So if your students are using a managed Chromebook from the school and you turn on locked mode, it means that they will only be able to see the quiz on their screen when they take it. They won't have the option to open other tabs and so on. For the sake of this demo, I'm actually going to turn that off and click Save. And here's what my quiz looks like. So I've got a few different questions. And if I click into this one, you'll see that when I have a question like this, I can see the answer key. And I can set what the correct answer is. I can set a points value, and I can set different feedback for if they get that question right or wrong. And I can do things like link to web pages or to a YouTube video to help them. This is really good if you are doing a flipped learning model, but particularly helpful for this remote learning model that we have at the moment. If you want students to do something at the beginning or end of the topic so you get a better understanding of where they're at. What have they learned? What are the big gaps across the whole class? I can do this for all different types of questions as well. So I have a short answer question here. I've typed in the different answers to that short answer question. And all you would need to do is just go and post this in Classroom. You could copy the link. So if I go to preview this form, here's what it looks like. You could post this link in Google Classroom or directly from Google Classroom, choose this form, which is just saved in your Google Drive like anything else. And if I go through and answer these questions, like this, and submit the form, I've got this set up so the students can actually view their score right away. And it will tell them whether they got the question right or wrong. It gives them the feedback, like so. And that feedback includes those links or anything else that I've left in. Now, on the background, for you as the teacher, you can see all of the responses coming in like this. And we'll give you some handy analysis so you start to understand, okay, what was the most frequently missed question? What are students getting wrong most often? Because that's probably the gap that we need to fill in now and go back and relearn or recover that topic that we missed. So I think this is really helpful. And my favorite thing about Google Forms is that you can click this little spreadsheet icon here. You can create a spreadsheet of all of the responses. And as students answer the form, as they submit it, a new row gets automatically added to this spreadsheet where all of that information comes through in one place. And you've got the score right there as well. If you set this in Google Classroom, you can even have Google Classroom import these scores automatically so they all get added to that gradebook in one place as well. I hope that demo was helpful. There's a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to jump through and answer those in a second as well. If you do have any questions, feel free to keep putting them in the Q&A box just underneath our video here, and we'll have some time to answer some more at the end. So there's one about having access to Google Meet. So your administrator can decide which services in G Suite you have access to. So it might be if you don't see Google Meet as an option when you're logged in, that they've disabled that for users. If you want to be able to run video calls, I highly recommend asking for them to turn it on. It's covered by all the same agreements as everything else, and it can be enabled just for teachers rather than everyone, for example. There's another question about accessing Google Classroom in China. So China obviously decides what's accessible on the internet or not. So it's really dependent on the connection that you have and the availability of the tools that you have within your school as to whether you can access the tools. But effectively, they're available on the web. There's a question that says, when a student completes a task using Google Docs, it opens online for the student to complete. If the task was set on Microsoft Word, would it open online as well, or would the student have to download it? So a little while ago, we actually made a change to how this works in Google Drive. And if you have a Word document, we'll open it automatically in the same editor that you see for Google Docs. You can convert it to Google Docs if you want to, but you don't actually have to do that now. I would always recommend, though, if you're using Google Classroom, to set the documents in the Google file types. So to make sure it is a Google document or a Google Sheet, because then you're going to get those options for making a copy for every student, for example. Can the video be shared? Yes, we'll make sure that we send out a copy after this as well. If we'd like to give feedback on a specific feature or tool or suggest an improvement, where would be the best place to do this? That is a great question. So in the bottom left of the screen in Google Classroom, you'll see there's a question mark. And when you click on that question mark, there's an option that says send feedback. And you can click on there and leave any feedback or feature requests that you have. The Classroom team does genuinely read every single piece of feedback that comes through that box. And that is how we prioritize future feature requests as well as we build out the product over time. So please do that. Click the question mark on the bottom left of the screen in Classroom and choose send feedback. Another question, can you record a meeting in Meet? The answer is yes. So currently we have enabled some premium features in Google Meet for everyone using G Suite for Education, and recording is one of those features. So right now it's available to every G Suite user if it's enabled by your administrator, and there's just a simple option to record a meeting in Google Meet. That's available for everyone until the end of September. After that, it will go back to being a premium feature, which is available in G Suite Enterprise for Education, which is a paid upgrade to G Suite for Education. Now, G Suite Enterprise for Education is in no way required. Everything that you need is in G Suite for Education, the free version, and we'll continue to update G Suite for Education with new feature releases and so on. But Enterprise includes some of those bigger features that we're just not able to offer for free, unfortunately. So the answer is yes, everyone can do that until the end of September. And if you want to continue after that, you need to upgrade to G Suite Enterprise for Education. In Forms, can a learner's response to a question then allow the next question to be based upon their answers? The short answer is yes. You would do this by selecting an option which allows you to route to a different section of the form based on an option in a multiple choice question that a student has selected. So if you are going to do that, I recommend drawing out a flow chart of some sort first, either on paper or in another tool. But yes, you can do that. There's an option to send students to different pages based on their answer. And in that case, I recommend doing one question per page as well. And I think there was a question about using Microsoft Teams with Google Classroom. So I'm going to hand over to Kirri for that one.
Yeah, so I did actually ask for a kind of clarification question on that one. But I think generally what we find is that either teachers use Microsoft Teams or they use Google Classroom to set work for students, but as Dean has already spoken about, that you can use things like Microsoft Office, things like, you know, Word or Excel, and upload those things to Google Classroom as, you know, your resources that you want to use. So just because you might not make the leap over to G Suite in its entirety, but you still want to use Google Classroom, that's absolutely fine, and you can still do that. In terms of integrating the two, right now there is no integration, and as I said, really teachers do pick which they prefer, and then they would continue to use that tool with their students. I also just want to pick up on a question that's come in about Google Forms. I'm looking that way because I've got another screen, but Google Forms. So someone asked, are the self-marking quizzes on Google Forms only multiple choice questions, or can they be ones that require students to manually enter their answers? Great question. Right now, self-marking quizzes allow you to do multiple choice questions, short answer questions where you can determine what answer is correct. So you could put in, the way that we see teachers do this a lot, particularly around, well, really any age, but particularly around primary school students, is that often they'll put in spellings that are quite common within their class, or also, you know, capitalization of letters, or different things that students could put in to be the right answer. So you can put lots of different right answers in, and you can also do grid choice questions as well. So it's another way to get self-marking feedback. The other thing is another question. So if students are working on paper and use a mobile phone to take a photo, can they post this straight into Google Classroom? Absolutely, yes.
And just to add to that, there's a native app for both iOS and Android as well. So whilst it's accessible on the web, if they want to get push notifications for their assignments that have been set and so on, that's a really good place to do it, especially if you want to upload photos. Cool. I think if you have any more questions, please do ask them. We'll still have some time at the end of the session to answer some more. And I'm going to hand over now to Peter and Laura from one of our Google for Education reference schools, Barton Peveril College. And they're going to talk a little bit about their story and how they're approaching distance learning right now. And again, if you have questions for them, please pop those in the box as well. So over to you, Peter and Laura.
Thank you, Dean and Kirri. Hi, I'm Peter, and I'm the IT manager at Barton Peveril College. First of all, I'll just give you a little bit of background information about our college and our Google journey so far, and then share how distance learning is going for us with Google for Education. So Barton Peveril, we have 3,600 students who are currently all studying their A-levels and vocational qualifications from home, and it's been going pretty well so far. We've adopted G Suite throughout our college. So what that means in terms of usage, we use things like Gmail for our communication with each other. We're using Google Meet for video conferencing, so for online lessons and for meetings at the moment. We're also using products like Google Drive for storing all our work, and Google Sites, which is a really nice way of sharing resources and easily creating web pages. And now I just wanted to share a little bit of our journey so far with Google. I'm not going to drive too long on this slide, but I just thought it would be useful to share where we come from and where we are now. So I was going to reveal all these points actually. And when you look at all this, it looks like we had some big complicated master plan over the last 5 or 6 years to get to a full college of 3,600 students, all using G Suite, and all teachers kind of fully buying into this great service. But in fact, it all started off 6 years ago, just with an experiment. We heard about a new product called Google Classroom, which had just been released at the time. And we're interested in investigating this and seeing if it could be used to raise attainment and help develop students' independence in their learning. And so we worked with our humanities department, who are very keen to try this. And we purchased our first 12 Chromebooks, and we gave all the humanities students access to Google Classroom. Feedback instantly from our students was very good. The teachers liked it. It saved them a lot of time. And also my team liked it because we found it's actually a really easy product to set up and administer. So the next year, word had gotten around about this pilot, and we had a number of other departments queuing up to try out Google Classroom and start using G Suite. And we had a full support of our SLT, I should add, at this point. And we decided to expand its usage across the whole college. And then the following year, we actually got around to writing our digital strategy, which was heavily influenced by what we'd learned about using G Suite for Education. And it really opened our eyes to the benefits of working in the cloud, as it meant that students could access their work from any location and on any device. And at that point, we were really thinking about students bringing in their own devices, but in hindsight now, actually, this prepared us really well for distance learning, because since then we had spent kind of a lot of time looking at other systems in college which weren't already in the cloud. So things like our kind of internal college forms, we moved to Google Forms. A lot of the shared drives, which used to be on traditional kind of file servers, we moved those up to Google Drive and had those accessible across college in G Suite. And the following year, we spent some time training, particularly around using G Suite for flipped learning, which again was a very good in preparing us for using G Suite for distance learning. In terms of planning for distance learning, way back in March, which feels like a lifetime ago, we had a cross-college meeting with representatives from across the college, and we sat down and thought about what distance learning should look like for our learners and how our teachers would deliver that. Of course, G Suite played a huge role in this, and we suddenly realised that the last 5 or 6 years in adopting G Suite across the whole college has prepared us really well for distance learning. So we made some decisions, like we would continue to follow our existing timetable as it's familiar to our teachers and learners. So we stuck to our 4 lessons a day, and that's worked very well. We also thought we'd blend asynchronous and synchronous learning. So what I mean by that is we would have a mixture of live online lessons delivered over Google Meet, and we would also use Google Classroom for that kind of asynchronous aspect, so students could access assignments at any time or recordings of lessons at any time convenient to them. The week before we closed, I trained 200 of our staff in using Google Meet, because even though we had used Google for Education for the last 5 or 6 years, Google Meet was a new concept to most of our teachers and even my team. So we spent some time the week before we closed just getting teachers comfortable using video conferencing for delivering live lessons, and also looking at some other technologies which work well on Chromebooks, like screencastify, which allows you to do a recorded lesson, a bit like what Dean showed us earlier. And the other thing we did that week was we loaned almost 400 of our Chromebooks, which we would normally have in classroom sets, so in trolleys. We loaned those to students who didn't already have a device. And Chromebooks have been very effective, actually, because it means that students can get onto all of their work with G Suite, but also they're really reliable and easy to use for our learners. So in fact, we've had 400 Chromebooks at home now with our learners, but we've had very few support calls from our students. Now we're going to drill down into a bit more information about Google Classroom, which I mentioned we've used now for almost 5 or 6 years. And until we closed, we had about 500 active classes on Google Classroom. But once we switched into distance learning modes, we created classes for things like tutor groups and some of our enrichment as well. So that's now gone up to 700. So we've got 700 active Google Classrooms, which has worked brilliantly, and I've been really pleased with, like all of our staff. But now I was going to hand over to Laura, who's our learning support tutor and uses Google Classroom a lot more than what I do. Over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Pete. So, hi, I'm Laura. I'm the learning support tutor at Barton Peveril. So not only are sort of traditional classes, so A-level and BTEC courses using Google Classroom, but also Q Extra courses, so our enrichment programme. And that includes learning support and study support sessions as well. So students with a learning support need still have access to support beyond the classroom as well. So teachers have been using this in sort of different ways. And on the next slide, we've got some ideas of sort of how that is being used as well. So one of the main things is using screencastify, which has been really useful in terms of doing video-based instructions, and perhaps that might be talking through Google Slides, for example, or setting different tasks. And these are around sort of a maximum of around 20 minutes. And they can also be paused at different points. So the students will watch a bit of the video and then do a task, and then they will post their assignment or their task onto Google Classroom. So it's all fully integrated within the one space of Google Classroom where all the materials are posted and everything is completed as well. What we've also had is students creating screencastify videos as well. So this may be to explain a theory, for example, to other students. And also in learning support, for example, we've had students show other students how to use technology for distance learning. So it's been really useful and giving them the ownership over their learning and teaching others as well.
Thanks, Laura. One of the questions which came up when we first thought about how we're going to do distance learning is how do we take a register? And a really easy way in Google Classroom is just for our teachers to post a quick question at the beginning of the day asking, are you here? That's worked very well, and the data from that can then be fed into our register. But then some teachers also integrate this into a quiz in Google Classroom. So not using Google Forms, but just using the simple quiz function in Classroom. And this is a nice way of just engaging students at the beginning of the day and just checking that we're all here and present.
So also, as I mentioned before, setting assignments through Google Classroom has been really easy. As Dean showed you in the video, you can just create a copy for every student and that out. So it's normally completed by the end of the lesson, and also you can set a time for when you want that assignment to be handed in. As it says, tasks should be about 20 minutes maximum as an idea. And what's really good in terms of Google is that we can leave comments for the students. So whether that's through Google Classroom or through the document that they are working on, but also using things like just Mote, for example, and giving verbal feedback. That can really work in terms of adapting to what the learner works best with. So there's lots of different options that it allows you to do.
Yeah, Dean mentioned earlier about setting assignments in Google Classroom. So you can attach Google Doc, Slides, Sheets, or Google Jamboard, which is Google's collaborative whiteboard. And we've got our teachers using the full range of these different products within G Suite. And assignments can either be set so that each student gets their own copy of that document, or what some teachers do, which works really, really well, is having a collaborative document in Google Docs or Jamboard, so that groups of students can still work together collaboratively at home, even if they're not in the same classroom, and still have some of that social contact with their peers. Okay, so now we're going to move on to talk a little bit about Google Meet, which I mentioned earlier was a very new product to us. It's something we certainly hadn't used before. But since March, we've actually hosted almost 5,000 live online lessons through Google Meet, and of course meetings as well for our support staff and teachers. And we've been kind of blown away by how easy it was to kind of get up and running with that. It works in the browser, so you don't need to download any plugins like some other systems we might have used in the past. So that made it really easy for us to get started with it on Chromebooks or Windows PCs or Apple Macs, or even the students' own devices in terms of mobile devices. In terms of meeting setup, we have a tool called the Google Admin Console, which the IT administrator in your school or college would normally have access to. And this allows us to really tailor that experience which our students and teachers get. So we made some decisions about customizing that for our learners and teachers. So we decided that staff should be able to record lessons and then share these on Google Classroom to enable students to catch up. and only staff can host a meeting, so students can't start their own meetings. And we also developed our own etiquette guide for students, just detailing, I'm happy to share this afterwards if anyone wants to have a copy, how to behave in an online meeting, dress sensibly, preferably being in a room by yourself, turn up on time, and just check the tech works a few minutes before a lesson, so a lesson can get started on time. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you. So as it says there, in terms of using Google Meet, so teachers can talk to the entire class, which has been really useful, but also can do separate groupings as well. So as we mentioned, only Google Meets can be arranged by teachers, but they can group different sets of students and then still allow group work to happen even through distance learning. The other thing that this can be really useful for is one-to-ones, but also in terms of, again, from the learning support point of view, we still have support for students going on. So an LSA will be available in a separate Google Meet alongside the lesson, so that student can still ask questions as they would do in a normal classroom environment. So trying to keep it, the support as available as possible, even though it's through a different format. But as I said, yeah, the small groups is working particularly well, and also gives a bit more ownership over to the students again.
And we also found that Google Meet can be an effective way to recreate that classroom vibe, which a lot of the students were missing by not being physically there in the classroom. So, for example, some teachers would set up a Meet and not actively be teaching throughout the whole lesson, but at least have it there in the background so that they're on hand to answer any questions from students. And so that was very effective. And the other idea I liked the other day was some teachers used to like to start off their lessons as students arrive in the lesson with some music playing in the classroom, particularly in some of the lectures we'd do. And teachers can still do this just by sharing a tab, playing a Spotify playlist in the Meet as students arrive, which I thought was just a really nice idea for kind of recreating that classroom vibe.
So the experience we've had is that students have been extremely respectful of this online environment, and they are really engaging with Google Meet as a format. We've had really high engagement, and in terms of things like turn taking and using the chat facility has really worked well in terms of having that respect between not only teacher and students, but between other students as well. Using Google Meet has allowed it to be a bit more personalised as well. Being able to have those one-to-ones has allowed that interaction, as Peter said, and that more of that social side that is really important at the moment in allowing that engagement with staff and students.
As I mentioned earlier, all lessons are recorded on Google Meet. So we made that decision, firstly for safeguarding, having that recording there. But we also found it was really useful for sharing with students on Classroom. So if a student wasn't able to make that lesson, they can still catch up. And we've also had feedback from students saying that they found that really useful. Even if they were in the lesson, they can still go back to a specific point in the lesson and have a recap or reminder about a particular topic. And we thought at first students might not be comfortable with the fact that it's being recorded, but actually feedback has been very good, and yeah, they like the recordings being there in Google Classroom and having it on hand. Now I just wanted to finish on this slide, which is just sharing some of the feedback we've had over social media from some of the parents and some of the learners at Barton Peveril, and we've just been blown away by how wow everyone's taken to distance learning using Google for Education. And yeah, we've just been very pleased with this feedback. What we're working on now, we've just launched this week, is actually giving the Year 11 students who will be joining us next year early access to their college Google accounts. And we've set up some taster Google Classrooms for them for all of our subjects and also our enrichment sessions, so that they're able to now get logged on while they're at home and start exploring some of the lesson content and getting the feel for what learning is like at Barton Peveril, whether it's in person or distance or a combination of both in the future.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Laura, so much. It's really great to actually put all of what we've talked about in context, right? And actually think and actually hear about how you're doing it in practice, because it's always so useful for other colleges and schools to hear how someone else has adopted it, because they can definitely learn lessons and take best practices. So thank you so much for prepping for today and for spending the time in coming to talk to us. We obviously, the questions are still open, so if people have questions, please do feel free to pop them in, and we can make sure that we get them covered in the next few minutes. One question that did come in, Peter, was we had a question actually around reporting on Classroom, and I've had this quite a lot recently, but I would love to hear from you as the IT admin, who I'm sure is getting requests for reports from your senior leadership team on the usage of Google Classroom. What's your approach to that, and how are you going about, and what type of reporting are you actually doing right now?
Okay, yeah, so I mentioned earlier we have this tool called the Google Admin Console, and this has a reports function which can give us reports about all the different products in G Suite. And of course, one of those is Classroom. So we can tell things at a glance, like how many active classes there are. We can see how many posts are going up to Google Classroom every day. And we can also drill down into more detail and see things like which students are logging into Classroom, which teachers are using it. And that's enough for us. So we're normally looking at reports at a fairly high level. I know that there are other ways of drilling down to even more detail. So Google for Education Enterprise, for instance, lets you export all that information into, I'm going to get a bit technical now and say BigQuery, and really delve into those reports. There's also other plugins like, their name is escaping me at the moment, but Dean might be able to remember those, like Statistics 24, I think could be one.
Yeah, and
which is an extension.
Yeah, so I just actually popped this as an answer to the question, a couple of links, but you can use the Classroom APIs to pull out more data, more information about Classroom, and that's if you're feeling, that you're able to do that. Some people feel more confident than others. And there is actually a third-party tool, which is one of our partners has created based on this need, that allows greater admin access, which is Classroom Toolbox. And as I said, I've popped in the link into the answer to that question. So you can go and have a look at that. And Statistics 24 is another one of their products as well. So definitely go and check it out if you're looking for additional features. I think just one last question to finish off to both of you, and probably this one's more for Laura, but if you were kind of speaking to teachers out there who are brand new to using G Suite and, particularly in an FE context, what would be your top tip for getting started?
I think it's just, this sounds really broad, but give it a go, and because you can't do anything wrong with it. There's no worries with it. It's really easy to use. I think if in doubt, have a look at videos online as well. Twitter is so useful for getting advice about how to use things and being able to contact yourselves and Google straight away to ask any questions, and the feedback being so instant. So I think just give it a go. Maybe try just really something, setting up a classroom, and maybe adding some staff rather than adding students straight away if you just want to trial it. We've got a Google Classroom, for example, for all staff where we put on resources out there. So you might just want to set it up maybe within your department, have a few people in there, have a little go, because you can't do anything wrong with it, and just trial it out first. And then you can, once you're confident with it, then put it out to students after that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that would definitely be my advice as well, is that you can't break it. So just click anywhere and see what happens, because you'll probably discover something new, and you'll probably be an expert before you know it. So with that, I'm going to pass back over to Tim. Thank you so much for your time today, everyone. Over to you, Tim.
Thank you. And thanks to Dean, Kirri, Peter and Laura for that really interesting session. I'd just like to invite delegates to complete the feedback survey that will pop up when the webinar ends, and to encourage you to engage with us on social media using hashtag Pearson Digital Live. And also the final slide that you'll see on your screen has a link to a webpage where you can go and visit for more information. I hope you have enjoyed your day so far and that you enjoy what's yet to come. Thank you. Bye-bye.